Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Greet the Week. We're going to be talking about our holiday for today, or for a lot of people that's on it. So, Jan, it was your thoughts on it. So, what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, today we're celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. And so I did a little bit of research on him, to try to say, well, let's talk about what he did, and then I just started thinking about, how he was assassinated for his beliefs. And I remember back when I was in graduate school that, talking about people fighting for what they believe and standing up for what they believe. And a lot of times when you have a really radical idea, you die for it. And, Martin Luther King Jr., that's what happened to him. And I start thinking about how emotional people get about certain things. And really what Dr. King was talking about was just equal rights for human beings. Nothing major. I mean, it doesn't hurt anybody when you do integration of the races. And I can remember my dad, who's from Cuba. He came to the United States in the 1940s, the early 1940s, and he once saw a drinking fountain and went to get a drink of water, and somebody stopped him and said, no, that's the colored drinking fountain. The one you need to drink from goes over there, is over there. And he just thought it was so odd that there would be a different drinking fountain for colored people. That's what they called them then, and whites. And he said, we never had that in Cuba. Everybody was the same, was treated equally. But just to think of something like that, to be so controversial that somebody lost his life because of it. I wanted to start with that, that whole concept there. But then, Mona, for you, I found some words of Dr. King's. And then I have a list of words that he used in some of his quotes that we can talk about.
Okay.
So anyway, and I think about the political situation that it is now, how divided the parties are over some things. I don't want anyone to get upset, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, is how important is it really? The amount of anger that goes back and forth, and even with their diet. I mean, I think most of you know that I'm on a plant-based diet, and there are family members that I talk to about not eating any meat, and they get into this big argument about how you have to have meat, you have to do this, and that's silly what you're doing. It's just how people get so emotional about things when you step back and think, well, what's the real issue here?
Yeah. I have this thing here. I thought that I thought was so powerful. Someone had asked the question about what's wrong with, why isn't common sense anymore? And it was Marilyn Vos Savant, and she answered the fact that, well, the common sense is normal. Because whatever you've been grown up with, whatever you've been used to, that's what you have a tendency to think on. And so she talked about to become a thinker instead of a believer. Be willing to challenge what you believe. Be willing to challenge your thoughts. And some people are scared of that. You're afraid to challenge what they believe. Well, if you hold on to it because that's what you've always believed and what you've always been taught, but what if you've been taught incorrectly?
Right.
And so we need to
change.
Yeah. We need to challenge our belief. And she says to become a thinker instead of believer, a fundamental step is to associate yourself from any political party.
Is to disassociate yourself?
Yes. So you can become an independent thinker.
Right.
Rather than following in that emotional thing. I want to let you go, and then I also came up with a couple of little things because, well, let me just put it up right now, okay? Now,
okay.
I did this graphic that am I screen sharing? Can you see it?
No.
I haven't yet. Oh, wait, I got a screen share.
Yeah.
Okay. let me take this down, because the reason we won't change our mind is whenever we're just too set in the fact that we're right. And
Right.
it's even, and the more right we are. So I want to share and share.
There you go.
And then, my goodness, close everything else out. Okay, here it is.
Okay.
The little chart.
There we go.
Yeah,
Yep,
the little chart that I made. So here's our opinions, our beliefs, a fact, truth, or
our reality.
Yeah. Well, a belief can be founded or unfounded. We can still believe it. But the thing of it is, it's emotional.
Yes.
Our logic is emotional. Being subjective is, well, anyway, as we learn to not be so emotionally involved with it.
Yeah.
And to look at the fact of how, well, how might
we are emotional, and it's to understand that just because you're feeling a particular emotion doesn't mean you have to act out on that emotion.
Right. Or it doesn't mean that emotion is correct. Or it doesn't mean that it is, that it's the best. It doesn't mean that it's an absolute.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because emotions are taught too.
Yes.
And because they're based on our beliefs.
Yeah.
And depending upon what our belief system is, we're going to have a certain reaction to things. And but we can, supersede that emotion and say, hey, okay, I feel this emotion, but I'm not going to allow it to control me.
Right. And see if there's some other thoughts in there that you could think that might tone it down, where you could see whether it is a true emotion, whether it is a true, whether it's a truth to believe, or whether it's a truth to say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I've watered it down, or maybe I have put too much stuff in it that it doesn't have any wateriness to it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, 2013, Christmas morning, 2013, my father died. He died on Christmas morning. And we had all the kids here. And my husband's like, well, maybe we just don't do Christmas today, so you can take care of that. And I said, no. We so rarely have all the children together. They're only going to be here for a day. Let's celebrate together. I'm okay. He died very early in the morning, so I was able to take care of everything, before anybody even got out of bed. and I was fortunate enough, that I mean, so this the mourning, and the part of it is that, you do feel sad and you're upset, but spending time with family is the best thing to do for that. And instead of telling everybody we're not going to celebrate today, it's like, no, we're going to continue life, because Dad, that's what he would have wanted. We're still respecting him. We're still taking care of, what happened, with him, and, honor him. But life goes on too. And I don't have to be sad and can't enjoy the day. It's, because some people look, said, well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? And I said, well, I'm just trying to see what's best for the situation.
Right. Good for the whole.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's I got a lot of comments from people about that, but it's our emotions are signals, and when you just look at it as a signal, then you can decide whether you want to heed that signal or not.
Right. And then as emotions, it is to feel deeply, but also while we're feeling deeply, it's to elevate ourselves higher so that we can overcome, so that we can feel that emotion without infecting everybody, especially if it happens to be a negative one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but let's move on to a little happier light here.
Okay.
I know Nona loves her words. And so there were a number of quotes that Dr. King had made, and he uses these words in a little different manner from what we normally use them. And so the first word is finite. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope.
All right.
And so finite, means that it has limits and conditions or bounds. With the infinite means limit.
Boundless. Absolutely limitless.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow, that is beautiful.
Yeah, and so I mean that's not a way that we normally find that word finite being used, but it does tell the story, the finite disappointment.
Right.
But never to lose infinite hope. So we might be disappointed about this little thing that happened right now, but there's hope. We're never going to give up. We're always going to have hope. We'll make it through. And then here's another quote using the word perish. It said, "We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools." And so you think about all of the controversy that goes, back and forth, that we're kind of being foolish to allow this controversy to keep going instead of trying to find common ground.
Exactly. The signing of the Declaration of Independence, that it was Ben Franklin supposedly that quipped, when he was signing it himself, he quipped, he says, well, we must all hang together or we shall all hang separately. And when you look at the history of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, many of them were hung, literally were hung. Their homes were ransacked, their children were kidnapped and killed. And, because of people not believing in the equality that is offered through the Constitution.
Yeah.
And
that just goes back to the same thing that Dr. King was fighting, for, and is that, we do have, it does bring up so much emotion where people do get killed and families get hurt. And it is just so sad that we go to that level, that we will do those kinds of things instead of trying to figure out, okay, how can we work this out and all be together.
And just like your dad coming from Cuba, that is, a pretty oppressive regime, and noticing, well, there wasn't any discrimination there. It kind of goes back to well, I just lost my thought, so you go ahead.
Well, it is kind of interesting because, he taught us from a very young age, everyone's created equal. You don't treat somebody differently because of the color of their skin. And then I found that too, and we mentioned this a couple of years ago when I had gone to Peru, and my impression with the people there and their thoughts of the Spaniards when they came into South America, the Spaniards and the natives, they joined together and they became one race instead of the separation that we have here in the U.S. with the Native Americans. There they didn't know what percentage they were Native Indian or Native American and what percentage they were Peruvian or Latin American. It was just, we're all one, we're all together. And in this country, we don't have that. There's still that definite separation. And so that's just kind of been the way we do it here.
Right. And that brings back what I was going to say. Was in in Dr. King's letter from a jailhouse. He was writing to them, and in his very first paragraph, he was writing to the clergy because so many of them were against him as to why he was doing this peaceful protest. Mm-hmm. And he said for that, the Black race has been on America for 300, in the American soil for 340 years. And yet they can't even go into a restaurant and get a cup of coffee.
Right.
Without having major protests. And that's why I'm saying that in other countries, they didn't see that, like in Cuba. There was other oppressions there, but not the inequality
right.
of human being.
Right.
And that 340 years. And yet apartheid was already working beautifully in Africa and in other nations. But yet what is wrong here in America? And it's still today. That is still today. Even though there have been major steps forward, there's a lot of ways yet to go.
Right.
In appreciating others' ethnicity and appreciating each other's beliefs. And sometimes when we boil it all down, it's really basically the same thing.
Yeah.
That we're upset about.
Right.
Or that we want brought into, we want equality, but the way we go about getting that equality is from two different points of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I wish I knew the answer, but I don't know how much longer it's going to take.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move over to other words.
Okay.
Injustice. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Exactly.
So when you start seeing, I mean, when you see an injustice that's being done, I guess you can either believe that same way or believe something, opposite of it. Or if you have no opinion on it, when you're seeing an injustice, you might decide that that's the way you're supposed to be. And again, it goes back to what you were saying. Let's go back to thinking and not just following what those ahead of us, have done, and to think about, does this make sense? Does this sound right to me?
And also just to simply speak up and say that, well, I don't see it that way.
Yeah.
Not to oppose. It's just, I'm not seeing it that way.
Yeah. Help me understand this.
Right. And let me think about it. Let me see if I see any truth to that. Because I know one of the things that I think about quite a bit is, and I think about it again and again, is who would I be if I didn't believe what I believe? And you know what? I've changed a lot of my beliefs.
Yeah.
A lot of them. Because simply I thought, well, who would I believe if I didn't believe? Who would I be if I didn't believe that?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
you thought you might be a better person if you didn't believe that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That maybe what they're saying has some truth to it, even though it's being spit out like venom.
Right. Yeah.
And so what if I didn't oppose the personality, but just appreciated the person?
Yes.
I was willing to hear what the person was coming from, rather than coming against, the purple hair or whatever it might be.
Right.
Well, I think about the prison system that, the people that came to the transitional housing to had to have a job. If they didn't have a job, then they, were dismissed from the program and went back to prison to serve out their full sentence. And well, they can't get a job with that purple hair or that hair, or that whatever. So with all those tattoos, without that, you know what? I'll just bet they can.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just bet they can. If you go to the right person, you can. There will be those that will not.
That's right. But if you're honest and people can tell that you're trying to make a change in your life and that you're sincere about it, people will give you a chance.
Right. And I also talked with them that, will there be people that's against your tattoos and your hairdo and your slang and all that? Yes, there will be. But are there people that will be willing to give you another chance regardless? Yes, there will be.
Right. That's right. And so it's not to be discouraged and to pull back just because one person said no. Find that person who will believe in you.
Right. Don't let that disappointment be infinite. Let hope be infinite.
That's right. Have the infinite vote.
Yeah.
There's just a finite number of people who will tell you no.
God.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another one. Succumb. Never succumb to the temptation of bitterness.
Exactly.
And it is so easy to be bitter about things when you feel like an injustice has
Mm.
been done to you. And but don't, because when you succumb to that temptation, you become bitter. You just don't look good.
Yeah.
People see it. People see through that. They know what's going on, and it's just not a good place to be.
Definitely not.
So did you have something else you wanted to talk about? I've got a few more words here, but you've prepared your little chart. I don't know if you wanted to say a little bit more about that.
Well, I've on my chart, on the thing that it kept going to, let's share again,
Okay.
is a couple of quotes that I wanted you to, I think you can see them better whenever you actually, is it sharing?
No.
Those of you that are watching later, thank you for your patience and kindness.
Here it's coming. Okay. All right.
Okay, there it is. There it is. Okay. Well, can you see the whole thing?
No, it's gotten
Yeah, I've got
got too
several.
big. Can you make it smaller? Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
there it is. Go to that one. There we go.
okay.
Okay. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only
Right.
light can do that.
Yeah.
Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
Right.
And so often we look at those spectrums, and so hate on one end and love on the other. But as we just come a little bit in, it's that you can maybe dislike something, but not the person itself.
Right.
Yeah. But
Right.
I love this other quote. And of course, I put the little graphic here, the good and the evil. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because it's so true. So Dr. King said, we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is, I can't read it because of.
Devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love.
Yeah.
There is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies.
Yeah. It's discovering. And rather than all too often, whenever we discover something in ourselves, we want to say, well, I can't help it. That's just the way I am, bless God.
Right.
Except it doesn't bless God. And it doesn't bless one another. And whenever we see that evil within us, or whenever we see that hate within us, or whenever we see that just grumpiness, it doesn't even have to be that extreme of evil or hate. When we see that grumpiness within us, if we can put another word to it, that makes it less powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm in I don't have to be this way. I can change. And I'll stop sharing, except to speak back and forth.
Yeah, because we don't have, back to the emotion, we don't have to follow through on that emotion that we're feeling. And if we are feeling an intense negative emotion, let's step back and go, whoa, 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 where did this come from? What is happening here? What belief is tied to this thought? And can I change that belief? Is that something that I want to? One of the values that are guiding my life.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's to your peer group. Sometimes you're a little uneasy about going against what your peers believe, but when you start questioning it, you'll start to feel a little uncomfortable. I guess that cognitive dissonance, I guess, is the name for that you're going, well, here all these people say we need to be doing this, but this just doesn't sit right with me anymore now that I've had a chance to think through this and see people who are being hurt by this point of view.
Yeah, or your peers, or even your family.
Even your family. That's the hardest group to go against, because they can push you out just as easily.
Right. Yeah. And always just choose to forgive, forgive, forgive. Even it seems unreasonable to forgive, just to choose to.
Well, forgiveness is for the person doing the forgiving, not
Really
for the other person, really.
it is. It's for us individually to choose to forgive, and then we're not so easily offended.
Right.
And so as we can just continually, well, I'm going to choose to forgive because they don't understand. And they don't understand, maybe, I like to look at, I've been thinking about that a lot, that as we misunderstand things in our innocence, or we see them askew in our innocence, or that's the way I was brought up, or that's the way I was taught, or that's the way, whatever. But often then, as we keep hanging on to that without tearing it apart and seeing if there's something else in there to look at, as we succumb to that rather than overcoming it, what happens is it goes from being innocent into just plain old ignorance.
Yeah.
It's that I don't want to hear, I don't want to see, I don't want to know, because this is what I already know, except we don't know it. Because, it's causing too many tumultuous emotions.
And we just don't want to go there.
And we just don't want to go there. And we don't want to see the error of our way. And yet, whenever we can acknowledge that with maturity and with grace and with ease, and is it embarrassing? Yes. But you know what? Sometimes it's a hurt that heals, not a hurt that destroys.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been looking at the ancient prayers of antiquity. Prayers of antiquity was to look and see beauty in everything, to look and see blessing in everything, to see wisdom in everything. But then also the fourth element of that was to see hurt in everything.
Oh.
But to realize and to feel that emotion, but to realize let it be a hurt that heals.
Right.
I mean, if you have cancer, you want it cut out. But there's a recovery time, and there's a hurt time, and there's an emotional time. Let it be a hurt that heals rather than one that destroys.
Right. Yeah.
And in one of the things that I was reading about in the paper, there is a person in Waco that had been relieved of their very public job and the firing and everything because of a breaking a law, and it was a literal law, and was let go, and it was a just action toward him. And now it's been 15 months, and he was asked to do one of the presentations for Martin Luther King, and it was just really beautiful about how he realized that his unjust act was met with a very just, or what he thought was, his action was met with a very just recommendation, because he was in a position that, it was criminal. And, so he had and he said how that he so appreciated Dr. King, he always had, but even more so, because he kind of has begun to equate with him as he has read more and more of his works, and the letter from a jailhouse and so forth, and looking at the fact that there is a just law and there is an unjust law, and a just law has to do with what everyone, even those that make the law, they're willing to abide by it.
Yeah, right.
Whereas an unjust law is the one that this is what you're supposed to do, but I'm not doing it myself.
Right.
And that, whether it's actually on the books of a law that's offensible, or whether it's in the books of, because I said so, you're doing it, whether that's in the home or in the workforce, it is very unjust.
Right. And that causes damage and hurts your credibility.
Right. And a just law is for the good of the whole.
Yes. That
it may hurt the person that you really liked, even though they messed up and they, still had that criminal offense, but it's forgivable. Whereas an unjust law is one that is just for harm. It's just for punishment.
Right. Lots of good stuff here today. Lots of good food for for thought. So we're out of our time for today. Thanks everyone for joining us and on the replay, and we'll be back again next week for another edition of Greet the Week. Thank you and see you soon.